are stepping into new territory. With today's video, we will be talking about professional wrestling. This is a topic that was suggested by Pat and Doomy a few months back, and it is a scandal known as the Montreal Screwjob. And I just want to say that in 1935, the Toronto Star referred to professional wrestling as sportive entertainment. And that's good enough to earn some airtime on this channel. But there's a lot to cover with this one, so let's jump right in. Now, when this whole thing happened in 1997, Bret Hart was a 14-year veteran of the WWF, which is today, of course, WWE, but if I don't make any mistakes, I'll be referring to it as the WWF throughout this video because that's what it was called at the time. So Bret Hart was hugely successful in the 90s. He won the International Heavyweight Championship twice, and then the WWF Championship 5 times. If you're watching this video and you've never paid attention to WWE, you probably have still heard the name Bret Hart, or maybe that's just because me and I'm in Canada. But during that sort of reign of the 5 WWF championships, so between his 3rd and 4th championship titles in 1996, he sort of took a 7-month break when he was out of contract with the WWF, and he was considering new contract offers from both WWF and its bitter rival, World Championship Wrestling, so WCW. WCW was offering him a 3-year, $8.4 million contract, which is approaching about $17 million by today's standards. But in the end, in October of 1996, he signed an unprecedented 20-year contract offered by Vince McMahon at WWF, which promised to make him the highest paid wrestler in the company, and it promised him a major role within the company following his retirement, so like a senior management role. So he was pretty much setting himself up for life. Like on paper, it sounds like a great deal for him, but behind the scenes, WWF was maybe not in a position to offer that kind of contract. See, by mid-1997, so just, put it 6 to 8 months after Bret Hart signed his contract, the WWF was facing some pretty bad financial difficulties due to competition from WCW. Despite not being able to sign Bret Hart, WCW still managed to become the largest professional wrestling promotion in the United States in 1997. And sort of at the same time, Vince McMahon was planning to make the WWF a publicly traded company, and that required him to minimize any sort of long-term financial commitments, despite having just offered Bret Hart. It's not a perpetual contract, but basically a 20-year contract. And by late September 1997, so 11 months after Bret Hart signed his new contract, the WWF's financial problems are at an all-time high. McMahon even started deferring payments to Bret Hart, saying that the WWF was in financial peril. Basically, that to survive, they had to shift direction a little bit, and they saw their future with guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker, what would essentially become the Attitude Era. And their plans did not include Bret Hart. So McMahon encourages Hart to reopen negotiations with WCW, basically saying, we're not paying you right now. We don't see a future with you, and we're not going to penalize anyone if you do switch course and get a contract with WCW. Kind of strong-armed him into leaving. In the end, November 1st, 1997, Hart does sign a contract with WCW that is scheduled to begin in December. And that could have been the end of it. But McMahon goes, hold on a second. That means that if we're not careful, if we don't take matters into our own hands, Bret Hart could enter WCW, our rival promotion, as the WWF champion. And that's not a good look for the WWF. It had happened once previously with another wrestler, and it was kind of a fiasco in the eyes of the WWF. So, with all that signed and ready to go, Hart is scheduled to fight or to wrestle Shawn Michaels, a guy that he has real life beef with, in the main event of the Survivor Survivor Series in Montreal on November 9th, so just over a week after he signed his contract, moving him over to WCW. And by the way, Montreal, Canada is Bret Hart territory, and that'll come into play a little bit in the lead up to this. So with this fight scheduled, this match scheduled, Vince McMahon asks Hart for his consent to job, as they say in the biz, to Michaels. In other words, McMahon asks Hart for his consent to script a loss to Shawn Michaels, and Bret Hart says no. He basically refused to give up his title to a member of the clique, which included Shawn Michaels, and it was basically a group of guys that had a lot of influence on the organization at the time. So it was kind of being seen as Bret Hart standing up for the so-called locker room for the wrestlers who were not part of the clique and who were staying in the organization. He also just didn't like Shawn Michaels. I think he didn't want to lose to Shawn Michaels, and he didn't want to lose to Shawn Michaels in Canada, because part of the storylines leading up to this moment in time, like I said, Bret Hart was, being Canadian was very much part of his persona, and Shawn Michaels had in the past defaced, I guess, the Canadian flag, and it was part of the whole storyline. So he didn't want to lose to Shawn Michaels in Canada. But Bret Hart wasn't trying to keep the belt, it wasn't in bad faith. He basically offered to lose the title anywhere in the United States prior to Survivor Series, or to surrender the title to McMahon on the episode of Monday Night Raw the day immediately after Survivor Series. So he said, I can go into Survivor Series not being the champion, or on the after show. Survivor Series is Sunday, Monday Night Raw from Ottawa. I can surrender my belt because I'm leaving the organization. In the end, however, McMahon, Michaels, and Hart all agreed to a disqualification finish at Survivor Series, which would be the result of a brawl between Hart's allies and Michaels' allies. And I'll come back to that and come back to what the plan was when we get to the event. But so the Survivor Series would end in a disqualification, and then Hart would lose or forfeit the title after that match on a later date. And before he started at WCW in December, there was still good 3-4 weeks between those two dates where he could relinquish the title. Hart also asked McMahon to have a chance before he left the organization to explain his heel character, but also to praise McMahon and the WWF to leave on good terms with the company and with the fans, and McMahon said yes. So everything seems pretty clean and agreed upon. So, November 9th comes around. The Molson Center, which is now the Bell Center in Montreal, is sold out. There are 20,000 fans in attendance. And the event is going as planned. Or, it's a full night show, everything looks fine. And so let's skip to the end. We're building up to the climax. And Bret Hart starts feeling like something is a bit off when, for one, there's a lot more security than usual around the ring. But that can be explained away as being part of the show. In a sense, these two wrestlers famously have a lot of beef, and so the beefed up security can kind of plays into that. But also, he thinks it's weird when they're going up to the final sequence that Vince McMahon is not at the announcer's table doing commentary where you would expect him to be. And Sergeant Slaughter, the on-screen commissioner, is standing with McMahon ringside. It doesn't add up to Bret Hart, but the match continues. So what's supposed to happen at this point? Remember, I told you I'd get back to the full plan. What's supposed to happen is this. Hart jumps from the top turnbuckle and takes down Shawn Michaels and also the referee, Earl Hebner. Is that loud? The referee is knocked unconscious. Hart puts Michaels in a hold. Michaels submits, but the referee is unconscious, so it's not over. Hart lets go of the hold to go and revive the referee, but Michaels ends up pinning Hart. At that point, a second referee comes into the ring, starts the count, but Hart's allies come in and break the pin. Michael's allies enter the ring, and there's 5 minutes of brawling, which ends in disqualification. Right, so that's what everyone agreed would happen at this point. In reality, Hart jumps from the top turnbuckle, takes down Shawn Michaels and the referee, but then Michaels goes off script and he puts Hart in a hold and doesn't let Hart reverse it. At this point, the match director was heard shouting for Hebner, the first referee, to get up. The second referee, who was supposed to run in after a little bit, he's yelling back like, no, not yet. That's not the plan. Hart's allies are backstage, just completely confused, so they don't come in at any point. And then the story goes that Michaels glances at Hebner, the referee, which some people saw as evidence, as proof that the referee, Earl Hebner, was in on it. Which, either way, like Hebner says that he found out 10 minutes earlier that this was gonna happen. So he knew at some point in advance, which is a shame because he had had sworn on his children that he would never double-cross Hart, and that he would rather quit his job than to participate in a screw job. But then he did it anyway. He did, though, not to get ahead of myself, but after the whole thing ended, he did lock himself away in his hotel room, apparently. And this clearly had a huge effect on him. But back to the wrestling match. Michaels tightens the hold on Bret Hart. Hebner, the unconscious referee, gets back to his feet, looks at the timekeeper, and shouts, "Ring the bell, ring the bell." McMahon then yells at the timekeeper to ring the effing bell. And as you can see, Bret Hart reaching for Michael's leg, the bell rings, and Bret Hart realizes that he's been screwed. And I mean, he's incensed. He goes over to Vince McMahon and spits in his face. He starts trashing cameras and computers, and he looks at the camera that's broadcasting the match, and he spells out WCW. Survivor Series goes off air 4 minutes early. So what happened? Why did they screw Bret Hart? Well, after McMahon, Michaels, and Hart all agreed to the disqualification finish, and as Survivor Series grew closer, McMahon started being paranoid. I think is a fair word to use. He was worried that if he let Hart walk away from Survivor Series with the title, WCW would swoop in and announce Bret Hart's move to their promotion. See, this was 1997. People got their news from television. And WCW's Monday Night Show came on 1 hour before Monday Night Raw. So basically, WCW would have had the next word after the Survivor Series. Now, there was never any intention to do that, nor do I think Bret Hart or WCW ever gave any legitimate reason for McMahon to think that that was the case, but Vince McMahon is gonna Vince McMahon, you know. In fact, a lot of the WWF wrestlers were outraged at McMahon and threatened to boycott Raw or even leave the company. I mean, you can see from their perspective, if a WWF veteran had been double-crossed by McMahon, why should any of them trust him? Who's to say he won't do them any worse? But in the end, Hart told the other wrestlers to fulfill their contractual obligations and to not risk their own future over this screw job. There is one final thing to mention, and I think we have just enough time. this is professional wrestling after all, so it's not shocking to think that the whole Montreal Screwjob was itself worked or scripted, and that Hart worked with McMahon on this. And a good number of wrestlers who were in WWF at the time have gone on record saying as much, saying that they believe that the whole thing was a work. Earl Hebner, the referee that night, said in 2019 that he thought that Hart was in on the work. Although again, with him specifically, I think that could be a coping mechanism. If he feels he was betrayed that night, but also betrayed his friend, I think it could be comforting for him to think, I didn't actually betray my friend, he was in on it. But a lot of his former colleagues, a lot of Bret Hart's former colleagues think that he had a part to play in this. He maintains, though, Bret Hart maintains the fact that this wasn't a work. Let me know what you think in the comments. Was the Montreal Screwjob scripted? I mean, what a way to go for Bret Hart, right? It's the big controversy that people are still talking about to this day. Would be pretty clever. The only part that sort of makes me think that it was all real, and it was a real scandal and a real betrayal, is the WCW that Hart threw up at the very end. I don't know that they would have wanted that promotion for the WCW on WWF turf. I made it through almost the entire video not getting WWF wrong. So, but that being said, the WCW thing is what sold it for me, so who knows? But let me know what you think in the comments. I've got 30 seconds to say goodbye. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed this little change of pace, and I'll see you very soon in the next video.